Hello and welcome to our show, The Awakening, here on WGSN-DB, the Going Bold and Going Solo Network. The information and opinions expressed on the show are just that, the opinions of the individual speaking based on their individual personal experience. They do not intend to diagnose and do not constitute professional advice or recommendations. Hello, my name's Tina Huggins. You know that pain, the stress, the struggles that divorced people go through? Well, that's what I do, is I help turn that struggle and that pain around to not only help you emotionally, but to help you save financial money. And today we are talking to Susan Shofer. Did I say that right?
Shofer.
Shofer. There we go. There we go. I should have asked before we started. So Susan's career began in finance. I thought this was so interesting as I was reading your bio, Susan. So she began in finance and she worked at T. Rowe Price. Susan was hired by a detective agency whose focus was primarily detecting fraud, a career where Susan flourished. She brings in investigation skills to her high conflict divorce. Susan has testified in court over 1,100 times, 1,100 hours, I should say, testifying hours.
1,500 actually.
Is it 15 now? Wow. Yeah, I was only taken from your short bio. Because of what Susan's learned during her time as a private detective, she has become a subject, excuse me, let me make sure I didn't skip my line. She has become an expert in parent alienation, which is what our topic is today. Susan was asked to give a TED Talk. Wow, just a TED Talk alone, to be able to be asked to do a TED Talk, that's pretty special. Susan spoke from the perspective of the child and how parent alienation negatively impacts families. Susan has a global presence and is, my eyeballs want to jump lines. Susan has a global presence and has worked with people all around the world. She has spoken to groups of professionals in custody space about ways to recognize parent alienation and how to diffuse it. This is a very important topic. So thank you, Susan, very much for coming on board with us today.
Thanks for letting me hang with you for a little bit.
Oh, I am so excited about this topic because, you know, there are some schools that say that there is no such thing as parent alienation. And then there are schools, of course, that say there is parent alienation. And maybe they're just calling it something different, but I personally, because I also work in the high conflict arena, I see people pitting the child against the other parent all the time. So whether you call it parent alienation or some other name, it exists. So how did you, I mean, I know you got into private investigation. So what made you delve into parent alienation?
Well, I actually didn't delve into parental alienation. I was kind of coerced to become a high conflict divorce strategist. That's how it really started. There were a group of attorneys over in DC. I live in Baltimore, who said to me way back in like 2013, you understand this whole dynamic with high conflict divorces. You should be like a coach or a strategist. And I said, bite your tongue. And then about 2 months later, I was with a group of mental health professionals who said the same thing. And these two groups didn't know each other. And I thought, oh, I'll give this some thought. About a year later, I jumped into it, and that's been my specialty. I got certified. And in fact, I'm part of an advisory board for where I got certified is now developing a program for high conflict divorce because we're seeing so much more of it. What seems to come out of high conflict divorce, the tragedy, not that it's a great thing, but it's this parental alienation piece. And because I started seeing it over and over, and I've worked with thousands of people now, I've been doing this a while, and I mean my emails are just flooded, constantly with people with this issue. And so I know that there's a school of thought that it doesn't exist, that the alienator really, I mean, it's unfortunate because we know that there are scenarios, and I've seen that many times, where there's a loving parent, they're getting divorced, and they just want to get divorced and move on with their lives. Then there's a person who doesn't want that to happen for whatever reason. And there's a lot of controversy. Is it a borderline personality disorder? Is it a sociopath? Is it a cluster B? Who really cares? Doesn't matter what the diagnosis is. We know, we see it. And I know that there's a whole group of individuals who say this is junk science. It really doesn't happen. Well, you know what? If it walks like a duck, quacks, or talks like a duck, it's a duck. And we know it happens. Those of us in the space know it happens. There are ways to diagnose it. There's ways to detect it. And are there ways to diffuse it? It takes a lot of skill to live through this experience. I know that there's people out there who say, I can get your kid for you in a week. And we have this little model and they'll come back to you. I'm very dubious to know that that works. I've worked with so many attorneys, so many mental health professionals, reunification therapists over the years who've said, you know what, you have somebody over here. This is the alienator, guys, giving you where they are. Every time I do this, I go over here. You got this person over here, and they don't want to stop. It's not about making them stop. It's how do you live with it? How do you live within this space? And that's what makes this really challenging.
Yes. And just like you, I mean, I see this person over here. I've read several of Tina Swithin's books, and she's one of the ones out there that don't like the term parent alienation. And she went through hell and back. She is an activist, and she is talking to the courts all the time about these types of things. So whatever she's calling it, it doesn't really matter because we all know that it happens. Like, for instance, right now I have a client who his wife has a restraining order on him, and the restraining order is against him from seeing the kids. There was never any proof. Nothing was ever proven. No videos. Now, there was an audio later taken where he did scold his children and he used the F word, but that was after the fact. And so those types of things happen. And right now, she is not allowing him to see or talk to those children. And the last that the information came from one of the children to him was that they didn't want to have anything to do with their dad anymore, that their dad was a bad person. And they weren't saying that a few months ago. They were loving time with their dad. And now they've been told that dad did A, B, and C. So yes, we see it all the time.
What else I see all the time, and if anybody wants to do battle with me about whether this exists, here's where it's very clear cut. When we hear language from children that we know is not part of their vernacular, a 5-year-old does not say the following: I don't want to see you, Mom, because you took all of Dad's money in the divorce and now he can't afford anything. Where does a child hear that? What about the 9-year-old boy who says to his mom, I'm not coming to your house anymore because, like, you really had to decorate? I mean, where are you getting the money? I mean, Dad's giving you so much money. I guess you're using it on that. Or what about the 8-year-old that says to her dad, I'm not coming to your house because your girlfriend is a whore? I mean, we know that these children are being told this. What else do we want to call that?
And that's funny. I'm like, did you get into my notes? Did you pull those statements from my notes? Because those are identical statements that I have heard.
Are you serious?
Yes, those are identical statements that I've heard that my clients come and say, this is what my child said to me, and it's like over and over and over, I hear them.
Also, we know, and I've spent a lot of time because I'm a very fact-based person. I don't come to this with, here's my opinion, here's my opinion. My undergraduate degree is in science. I have an MBA. I'm very pragmatic. As a private investigator, we had to know the who, what, when, where, how, and why. Come to court with facts. My opinion didn't matter. Facts mattered. So I understand that in this particular space, there's a lot of emotion, but there's also facts. We know that a child wants to love both parents. We know that instinctively. When there is a breakup, and sometimes the alienation begins before the breakup, all right? The seed is starting to be planted. But once there's a breakup, normal, healthy people, which is the majority of divorces are normal and healthy, because divorces become so prevalent that people have learned that divorce could get real expensive. So let's not spend all this money. They also know that divorce can hurt children. Let's not hurt our kids. That's what normal, healthy people do. But let's roll into the space where one or both people are not emotionally stable. And I don't mean that they are not functioning in the real world, but that they've got something going on, some kind of borderline personality, or they have attachment disorder, whatever it is that brings them to now increase the conflict, keep it going, and then involve the children. And in all the years that I've been doing high conflict, which has been basically the whole time that I've been in this space, if there's children within this framework, the kids are involved. And if the divorce takes place and the kids have aged out, they're involved. It doesn't matter if they're infants or if they're 35. The person who wants to go this route goes this route. So if we want to call it, I mean, we can call it whatever we want to call it. All right. But I'm going to call it parental alienation.
Well, and, and I'm going to back up just a bit. I have a co-host who's not here with us today. He had a situation that he couldn't come, and he is a relationship coach. And so his job is to take people and help them become healthier in their relationship. And so that we don't end up where you and I go. But as you know, most of our clients, your clients and my clients, come to us because they're having problems with their spouse doing what they're supposed to do. Or like I said, there's a restraining order that shouldn't be in place. And they've got custody of the kids, temporary custody, and those kids were good, and now they're hating the other parent. And so these are kinds of things that you and I hear. That's what our clients come to us for. So tell me, Susan, they've come to you and there's parent alienation. And I know that there is no fast fix if there is a fix, but how do you go about working with them?
Well, it really depends on where they are. Okay. So if they're in the beginning of the divorce and they're coming to me, most people come to me because they're in a high conflict divorce. I would say that if I had to throw a ballpark number, that would be maybe 25%. The large majority of people who come to me are already divorced. This is going on post-divorce. Mm-hmm. And one of my colleagues who you've had on your show, she's in the high conflict space also. And she said the same thing that I've said. Because what do we know about somebody with a borderline personality disorder? They're not going to follow the rules, okay? And they're going to keep this gravy train going for as long as they can. Interesting. Sometimes I'll ask a client, I'll say, well, how long have you been divorced? And they'll say 3 years, but about a year ago, this started happening with the kids. And then they'll say, and I don't know why he's doing it, because he's remarried. Shouldn't he be with his, and whether the client who's called me male or female, whether they're in a new relationship or not, it's irrelevant. They still want to pull this gig. One person reached out to me about 4 years ago. She was in Canada and she had been divorced 4 years. He was remarried. She just started to date somebody. 4 years later, he would drive by the house and have the kids look into her garage to see if there was another car parked in there.
Yeah.
And then and there wasn't. And then suddenly her son started, and her daughter started saying horrible things to her. One of them started to hit her in a sporting goods store. I mean, where is this coming from? Anybody wants to tell me that that dad was not filling these children's heads with some bad stuff? Well, we can have a discussion. I'm going to win that discussion. Okay. It's just hands down, because that just doesn't happen in a vacuum. It just, now there are some tricky spaces. I've had people call me and say they're being alienated, and I do some intake and I'm like, I'm not so sure about this. Okay. But I can kind of I've been doing it long enough where I can just look at somebody and see the angst and the pain and what they've been through and how costly it becomes.
Oh, the cost is just stupid crazy. And, you know, you said the gravy train. I have been involved in several situations that had nothing to do with the gravy train, except for maybe in the attorney's pockets, because the other one, they would attack my client through their attorney. And then once that I call it playing tennis, once they lob the ball over to you and you feel like you have to lob the ball back over to them, we've got this big tennis match going. And when we're playing tennis, it's costing us thousands of dollars. And in several of these cases, one specific one that I referred to, it was only about destroying his bottom line. It was destroying hers too, but she could give a crap less. It's just what she was going to do no matter what. And so she would refuse to do everything, which is all stuff that you've dealt with, refuse to sign the paperwork, refuse to turn in financials, ruined property, like literally let pipes freeze and water come in and throw tenants out and just on and on and on for years on end. This divorce lasted way over 5 years.
Okay. Well, you know, when we hear these stories, and people say to me, well, how long should a divorce take? I go, you know, a normal divorce, 12 to 24 months, somewhere in that range. You know, that's the normal divorce. And I've seen divorces with a lot of property and, you know, okay. And it's done in that framework. Not these. Not these at all. I mean, I have a client right now, lovely woman, came to me for parental alienation. Her kids are 15 and 17. This parental alienation started when they were 3 and 5. And he's remarried. He's been remarried. It doesn't make a difference. That's what I try to tell people. It does not matter if he's remarried, you're remarried. It doesn't matter what. And the person who wants to keep this going will keep it going. And when I work with people, it's like, okay, how can we get off this crazy train? And also, how can you stop responding to this nonsense? And that's really important. You know, that's the biggest piece of this. Not so much as, well, they're an alienated, they're alienated, this and the 8 manifestations and the ways they're alienated. When people tell me their stories, I say, yeah, I've heard it. They're like, no, really, this is the worst. I go, really? Okay. Are your kids alive? Yeah, then it's not the worst. And I can tell you, I could talk right now for about the next 24 hours about the cases I've had in the horrors. And in 24 hours, I'd still be, I would still not have cleared the deck with how many of these I've seen. And they're all horrible. I've seen people go into bankruptcy. I have a client who the husband stopped paying child support and alimony, and he was supposed to pay her rent and he didn't. She got evicted. And I'm talking about multimillionaires do this to their spouse. Mm-hmm. And when there is, and ladies, you're not going to want to hear this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Oh, by the way, I'm real direct. I'm from the Northeast. I can't help it. If you are a stay-at-home mom and he's making a lot of bank and you're thinking about getting a divorce, call me, because I'm not going to give you tips right now. I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to give away because if he's watching, I don't want you to be, I don't want you to get in trouble. But I will say this. If he wants to keep this gravy train going, you're in real big trouble.
Yes. I often tell people that have been in this and they start to go out in the dating world, and these are my men that go out there. I'm like, you need to find a woman that has a good job, that's on her own feet and owns her own house. Because if she is that, then she's not going to be digging in your pocket. And if you're going, this is what I told my children they're both boys. And I'm like, you don't want her to be a stay-at-home person. It's not healthy for her. It's not healthy for your household. And you need to have a healthy wife and a healthy household. And so she needs to have a job. She needs to have a way, in case she would to die, if nothing else, that she can take care of herself. And God forbid they would get divorced, but I want those women to be healthy women and be able to stand on their own 2 feet. So luckily, both of my boys are married to healthy women. And those, just like what you said, if you're a stay-at-home mom and wife, then you've got a lot of things that you need to set up before you take the exit door, because there's a lot of things you need to do to protect yourself.
And you're right. And that's why I always recommend that people come to me when they're thinking about it. What typically happens is that when somebody comes to me and they always start with, I'm divorcing a narcissist. And in this case, I'm going to say woman divorced, but half my clients are men. So let's not kid ourselves. You know, it goes both ways. But let's say what I usually will hear is, he's the worst narcissist. My children's pediatrician has never seen anybody this awful. My lawyer, if they have one, the worst narcissist, the worst, the worst, the worst. I go, okay, look, I don't know if they're the worst. What do I know? You know, I don't know if they're a narcissist, but if you're telling me they're the worst, then I'm going to tell you what they're going to do. And it's not going to be pretty. Okay. There's a playbook. And I don't want to scare anybody. I always say my tags are, I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to prepare you. What you don't want to hear is what you need to know. And we start to talk about it. And then in comes Mr. Cognitive Dissonance knocking on the door. And they start with, well, you know, Susan, I know you've heard really bad stories, but I don't think he would be this bad. I don't think he'll involve the children. Really? Because I've seen people tank their $1 million businesses to get out of paying child support. All right.
Mhm.
And I mean $1 million business, multi-million dollars. They will take the money out of it, the partners, and they'll tank it on. And then they go to court and they say, Your Honor, there's been a change of circumstances and I can't pay her this. I can only pay this. And the judge goes, well, listen, you know, I can't squeeze blood out of a turnip. And everything turns around. And if ladies, you think this won't happen to you, you will. And I have a lot of my clients are in Manhattan and they're in Florida. They're with these wealth managers. And I'm like, hey, listen, I always ask them, you know, what does he do for a living? Well, he's a wealth manager. Oh, okay. And so I really want to help people get to the place where their divorce is not tragic and the ending isn't tragic. And I can tell you lots of stories where from beginning to end, little bumpy, because of course, you know what we're dealing with, but good. I always say there's 4 things you need. Number 1, you need a good strategist. You need a good lawyer. Okay. You need a judge who gets it. And you need to stay in your lane. That's it. Notice I didn't say facts.
Mm-hmm.
Your lawyer will handle that. You have a really competent lawyer. They will handle the facts. You give them the facts and that's fine. You don't have to start explaining to everyone. And please don't tell everybody your business because you'll get real confused. I've had clients who are like, well, my best friend and then my aunt. And then I'm like, whoa, stop. Stop. It's too much. Stay in your lane. And so if you have those 4 factors, it really goes well. Now, with parental alienation, that's tragic. That's terrible. Because then in comes the guardian ad litems. In New York, they're called AFCs, attorneys for the children, the parenting coordinators. I call them the alphabet soup of nightmares. But here in Maryland, what they call guardian ad litems BIAs. There is another one, you know, so, and custody evaluations and social investigations, and they get very expensive. And I have had clients who have spent over $1 million in legal, not making this up.
Oh yeah. Oh, I totally know it. I have the same kind of clients and stuff, and everybody thinks, oh, the CFI, the alphabet soup, is going to make everything better. They're going to come in and find out the truth, and that is far from the truth. And I would love to help you if you think that's the truth, because these people can destroy your lives. They can destroy your children's lives and destroy it not just for today and this time frame, but for your future. So there's ways that you can communicate with these people that's truthful and honest, and ways that you don't, that is still truthful and honest, but you've got to be careful about how you communicate with these people. It's just very important on that level. So I
agree with you. I agree with you. And one of the things that I do in my 12-week program when people come to me is I do a whole session on the collaterals. That's what I call these folks, because usually they get court ordered. Yeah. So you have no choice. And once they get biased, and they come in neutral, and then they get biased. And if they're biased against you, well, that's a hard hill to climb to get them back to neutrality.
Right.
So I know they serve their purpose. And for those who are watching, who are parent coordinators, who are guardian ad litems, who are these collaterals, I know you're doing the best you can. However, there are certain ways that my client, I say to them, this is how it should be when you communicate. And that usually turns out well if they've been court ordered to have these people make decisions. And the sad thing about parental alienation that I really want people to hear is that it gets very difficult to raise your children when you're being alienated, because normal parenting gets thrown out the window. So for example, how many of us have been in Target and we hear a mom say, "What did I tell you?" We've all heard this. "I told you to put it back on the shelf. We're not getting it. We're not getting." And all of us moms go, I get it. Right? We all. Mm-hmm. You're smiling now, Tina. How many? Right? That's just being a parent. Right. And our parents said, "I told you to put that on the shelf. Get over here." Right? And we did. But if you're an alienated parent, here's how this goes. I've told you to please. First of all, you have to talk to them differently. You can't say, I told you very nicely. Can you put that back on the shelf? We talked for 10 minutes in the car before we came into Target, and you told me you wanted that. And I said, we can't really buy it right now. So we can't buy it. So I'm asking you really nicely in the store, can you please put it back? That, which is ridiculous to begin with, because most of us are like, when we go into the store, you are not taking the Polly Pockets off the shelf. And if you do, I'm going to walk out, right? But you can't say that. So now you have this whole way of speaking to this child, which is just ridiculous. And then what happens? They call the other parent. I was in the store, and you're not going to believe what mom did to me or dad did to me. It was terrible. And I'm feeling traumatized. And they yelled at me, and I'm so embarrassed, and they're so mean. And it just spirals out of control. And then they tell that to their therapist, and they tell it to the reunification therapist. And the person who is being alienated, my clients are like, I don't know what to do. It's like you're in this box, because you're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't.
I see that so often, the damned if you do and damned if you don't. It's hard. And the parent alienation aspect it's something that, so often it's not seen as it's starting to happen until it's too late. It's run off the tracks already, and finding a new set of tracks is the most difficult thing you're going to do.
But you know what else happens, Tina? Because I have a lot of people who reach out to me right at the precipice. And they'll say, I'm noticing a change in my daughter. Let's say it's the dad. I'm noticing a change in my daughter. She always would like to come to my house. How old's your daughter? 10. She always likes to come to my house. And now she doesn't want to. I go, okay, we got to talk now. We got to start right now. No, I don't think we got to start right now. No, I don't think. 3 months, 4 months later, I get the email, never fails. I get the email, starting help, SOS, I need to talk to you, whatever it is in the header, it's always in capital letters. And it turns out, you may not remember, but now my daughter won't come to my house at all. This has been going on for 2 months. Now she's told me, and And you're not going to believe this, Susan. She's told me that when she's 12, she can tell a judge, she doesn't want to live with me. Can we talk? Well, now this is positioned itself differently. I kind of give the analogy. You want to lose 10 pounds. It's January. You want to lose 10 pounds to fit into, you're going to be a bridesmaid in June. And you want to lose these 10 pounds. And you call a personal trainer. It's like, not a big deal. 2 pounds a month, 1 point, whatever pounds a month. But then you kind of don't do it. And now it's May and you've gained 40 pounds on top of the 10. How are you getting in that dress? So that's the analogy I use with people. I'm like, if you're starting to see the little underpinnings, this is the time. By the way, I'm house sitting and cat sitting for one of my best friends. I'm not in my studio. I'm not in the studio for our podcast. So this is not my usual hang. So when you see a cat, just say, hi, kitty. Anyway, so that's where you really have to, because there's going to be different levels. And I want to add to this, parental alienation is not an all-encompassing phenomenon. It differs with the age of the child. If they're 5 and younger, or even nonverbal, and you're not seeing the child, it's very clear what's going on. That parent is keeping the child. They start to get about 10. It used to be 12. I don't have to see you. I can tell a judge. Now we're hearing it at 10, 9 or 10. I can talk to a judge when I'm 12 or 13, and then I won't have to live with you. Somebody's planting this in the child's mind. Once the children get to be about 14 or 15, listen to me carefully, folks. Please listen to this. Don't fiddle around with this, because with each passing year, the courts will do less and less. There is an inverse relationship between the court intervention and the child's age. Once they start to drive and they're 16, a judge can say, well, yes, they have to adhere to it, but they're driving and they have school activities and they have weekends with their friends and parties. So it's very hard to draw that line in the sand. Well, what's normal teenage? They're 16, moving on to 17, versus they're being alienated. And if you talk to somebody who's married, intact family, they'll tell you, I never see the 16-year-old between studying and their projects in school and school activities and their sports. I never see them. They leave with the car, they come home, they're exhausted, they go up to the room, they wave, Maybe they'll, if they're boys, they go, if they're girls, like, whatever. And that's how that rolls. So you have a very hard time to get a judge, and they do, some don't. Some are like, well, and they become 17 and 18. And I know the mental health experts say, but we have to reel them in before they hit that magic, 18, the minute they age out. All of these people go away, by the way, folks. They all go away. All the collaterals are like the child's emancipated, they've aged out. So as hard as they've been working, as much as they've been charging you, that stops when that child turns 18. So it's really, if you're seeing this at 14, hop on it. And I want to add one more thing. We did a study in our office because, I'm fact-based and I just have to have the facts. In 2021, I noticed, why am I getting all these moms who are alienated by their 13 and 14-year-old boys? What is going on? So in 2022, we did a study, and because we try to make these little graphs. What age the child is, are they being alienated from the father or the mother? What are we seeing more frequency? 92% of our clients who were women were alienated from their sons. The boys were between 13 and 14. Because they're maturing and now they want to identify with the same-sex parent, the dad. Dad wants to be their buddy, their pal, their friend. It's hard on mom because just the year before, he was like her little boy. He's like, Mommy, I love you, and I one day want to marry a girl just like you. And now I want to go with dad. And so there's different stages of this, ages and stages. So if anybody is watching this and has a child who's 13 or 14 and is starting, don't wait. Your friends may say, well, it's just a stage. They'll come out of it. If this doesn't feel right to you, something's going on. And don't wait until, as Tina said, like it's already happening.
Yeah, you have to catch it in order to prevent it, stop it, keep it on the tracks. You have to stop it when it starts. You know, I look back over how I was with my ex-husband and my children. We set our rules for our children before our first child was born. And so when we became co-parents, for the most part, the kids kept on it. I was the disciplinary parent. And so there was nothing that I was, you know, that they got away with me. And I can remember one episode where I had just had it with being a mom. And I said, ask your dad. And this was the rules. So they asked their dad, and dad says, go ask your mom. Because that was the rule. If you had to ask your dad, it had to come back to me. So we both got together, dad and I, and we decided that this was how I felt and why I felt and what he felt. And so the kids weren't allowed to go to that child's house. But when you are co-parenting, and in this case, it wouldn't even be considered parallel co-parenting, it's conflictual co-parenting. And when you're conflictual co-parenting, there is no way that you have any control over the child, especially when they're with the other parent. You've got to get control of this before it gets to there.
Well, there's no doubt. And that's why I always say the sun is moving. And again, I'm not in my normal space. I have to adapt. Yeah, I mean, it just comes down to getting it before it gets you.
Yes, yes, most
and
definitely.
Remember, guess who knocks at the door? Cognitive dissonance. And you sort of talk yourself out of it. This isn't really happening. They're going through a phase. All kids do this. This is normal. No, it's not. It's not. And if it feels like it's not right, call a professional. You know, call somebody and say, look, here's what's going on. What are you thinking, Lincoln? And, you know, the person will tell you, yeah, it's a stage, or no, I don't see the signs. But I've never had somebody reach out to me and be wrong, especially when I hear what the child's doing, and I am familiar with the patterns.
Right.
Because they're pretty consistent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just the same when we go to divorce, and we use the word narcissist a lot on the show, but it doesn't even have to be a diagnose. It's when they are a narcissistic thinker and they stay in that narcissistic thinking state for so long. It's just like you had said before. It's a rule book. It's kind of like just a playbook for how they're going to do it. And you and I can say, once they start this, and we can go, yeah, and you're going to experience B and C and D, and it's going to be in this order, and it's going to be about this far apart. They're all the same. And that is the one thing I would like for our viewers to understand is that Susan and I, we deal with this every day. This is our job. We understand this. And I can tell you, coming in from an abusive situation myself, when we're in the middle of that abuse, and maybe even the parent alienation part, why we're in the home, we don't even see it happening. You know, I ended up with broken bones and didn't see it happening because of the way that the broken bones happened. I never saw myself as being abused. Just things were bad at home. We fought.
Well, and that does happen. You know, that does happen. And that's why I say that cognitive dissonance knocks on the door.
Right.
Because that's the part where you're right on that edge. You know it's bad. You know it's bad. Then you talk to somebody who says, you know it's bad, and here's what we can do. And not only is it cognitive dissonance, but then it gets scary. Because the devil we know, like in your case, is less frightening than what you think the devil out here may be. But there are professionals who know that out here can be a lot better than this devil.
So true, so true. So we're getting ready to come to the end here pretty soon, Susan. So I want to make sure that our viewers know about you and your program, because you mentioned the 12-week program. So can you kind of explain that to the viewers, please?
For those who are starting a divorce, we have a 12-week program. It's one-on-one coaching, and it's really to help you understand the process, the collaterals that may get involved, how to deal with your children. If you don't have an attorney, how to find the right attorney. And it's not that your best friend's boss who had a divorce, well, his sister had a, like, not to all these degrees of separation, not, well, I found an attorney and I really like the colors in their office. No, you need to find the right attorney because you want to have the attorney stick with you from soup to nuts, because you don't want to attorney hop. We can talk about that real quickly in a second if you wish. And then we address when you have to, or if these collaterals are brought on. And most of my clients who come from the beginning, they don't have that because they get in the hands of the right attorney. They have a really solid settlement. So where there's no places for violations, it can't just be your boilerplate every day. For example, custody, it can't be every other Friday. You pick up the kids every other Friday. That's just too much. For the normal healthy couple, they can do that every other Friday. Yeah, I'll pick them up at 6. Yeah, well, I'm running a little late. How about 7? Okay, fine. Never can that happen in a high conflict situation. It just never can. So that's about 12 weeks. We have a 6-week for parental alienation, and that is like a teaching tool. Or you can just do regular coaching. I like the programs because it really gives guidance. And that's what most people need. I don't want people hanging around forever and ever, not that they can't call me again, but I really want them to understand what's happening, take the bull by the horns, and get through this, because this is an event in your life. It shouldn't become your life. You shouldn't become a forever divorce litigant. And I have clients who have said, Susan, this has been going on for 5 years. I said, do you know what you could do in 5 years? And for those of you out there, when you see your friends and you're like, you're not going to believe what he's doing again. They can put up with that for about a year. But after a while, 3 or 4 years, like, what's up with her? Why is this still going on? And you watch people who in 4 years, they get a PhD. They started a business. They're making millions of dollars. They started building a house. The house is built. They flipped it. They're buying another house. Everybody's doing everything, and you're getting stuck in this space. And you don't want to be stuck there. So the goal is to get you from the beginning to the end. And so that you can live your life, because you don't know how long you have. Like, what, you don't want to do this forever.
Yeah, so true. So
you want to eat cake forever, right? We want to eat cake forever.
Right. So Susan, how can our viewers find you?
You can go to my website. Everything's my name. Except we are launching a podcast, and it's called Before It Gets Ugly. And I know, can you believe it? And it is starting, the first episode will be available. We're taping quite a few episodes. The first will be available the middle of April, but we'll be on Substack, we'll be on Insta, we'll be on TikTok. We already have lined up a lot of guests, a lot of really great attorneys will speak about this, and we will also have people who are going to share the nightmare. So what and what mistakes they made by not dealing with this before it gets ugly. So again, everything on social is my name. Nothing fancy.
So very, very, very good. I want to give a plug out for my co-host, Matthew P. Hoffman. He's a relationship coach. He's a kick-ass husband. He wrote the book, Kick-Ass Husband. So please go check that out. It's really wonderful. And that is for you, so that you don't have to end up where Susan and I have to work with you, where there's parent alienation stuff that's going to take place as you move forward. We're hoping that Matthew can fix that kind of stuff so you don't end up in our lap. But
I love that idea. I've got to get that book, Kick-Ass Husband, because a lot of my clients, we talk about dating at the end. I have to talk to him. He's got to come on the show. Because a lot of them, when they start to date again, they're afraid. They're afraid.
Yes.
And how to find that kick-ass husband, right?
Yes. And Matthew P. Hoffman is an amazing relationship coach. So my name, of course, is Tina Huggins, and I'm a certified divorce coach, meaning that I have been trained in the complexities of divorce. I'm also a certified transition and recovery coach. I'm a certified restorative family mediator, and I'm certified as a conflictual co-parenting coach. All of that means that I just understand what you're going through. Not only do I understand from my training, I've also experienced it, and I experienced that with them. So I understand from both the textbook and from the knowledge of experience of what you're going through, just like Susan has from her experiences. So when you can find me on, you can email me at coachtinalynn@gmail.com. That's Coach COACH Tina TINA Lynn LYNN @gmail.com. You can find me on Facebook under Tina Lynn Huggins, HUGGINS, LinkedIn under Tina Huggins, on Instagram under Divorce Coach Tina Lynn, and TikTok under Divorce Tina. So, Susan, what is a final bit of information that you can give our viewers to help them?
I'm going to repeat what I've said throughout, and that is two things. If you are getting a divorce, whether you want it or not, if your spouse came to you and said, I'm done, or he or she wants to move on, don't put your head in the sand. Get help immediately. And you need and like Tina said, she's certified. I am too. I didn't just say, oh, I've been divorced and you can too. It doesn't work like that. I have a lot of training, a lot of experience. Again, theory, knowledge, book, and then practical and in the trenches for over a decade now, and a lot of court experience. I know what it's like to be in the hot seat. When you go to court, your lawyers litigate, it goes like this, but when you go to court, you're in the hot seat. And I was as a PI, because I came into the courtroom with evidence. One side loved me because I had the evidence, and one side hated me for the same evidence. Can you imagine? You're loved and hated for the same thing. But if you're feeling now on the parental alienation side, if you are noticing your child is changing, and that change is about rejecting you, not just rolling their eyes when they go upstairs, but but they are really, being obnoxious. They don't want to see you. They're making accusations about you. They're calling your names. They're becoming violent with you. They refuse to visit you during your visitation time. Please don't let that continue. That only escalates. Get somebody to help you as soon as possible.
Amen. And so I'm just going to echo that before we close out here. If you are thinking about it, or you've just found out that your spouse wants to get divorced, that's the perfect time to hire a divorce coach. That is when we can help you out the most. That is when we can save you the most money. And if you're dealing with that parent alienation, you just saw one of the parent alienation experts. So make sure that you get in touch with one of us if you're in that position, because it's best to catch that now before you run off the tracks. So I appreciate you all for joining us. And as I always end this, if you are in a violent situation right now, call 911, or in the UK, 999. Get the police there, press charges. Do not drop the charges. If you drop those charges, that is when things become more dangerous for you. That is your key out of the abuse. If you are dealing with or know somebody dealing with domestic violence, please call the domestic violence hotline, 800-799-7233. That number again is 800-799-7233. And can I ask you please to like, comment, and share this with others to help them. Thank you so much, Susan, for being on here.
Thank you.
Most certain that we will have you back. This is a topic that everybody needs to know how to deal with. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we'll wish you all the very best.